Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the All Access Automation Podcast. In this episode, we're deep diving into the world of managed services with the brilliant Ollie Fulljames from C2. We explore the current state of the industry, how and why it's changing, and we look into what the future of managed services holds. I hope you enjoy. Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of the All Access Automation Podcast. Today I am delighted to be joined by Ollie Fulljames. How are you getting on?
Yeah, very well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
No problem. I suppose a bit of a gloomy day here in London, but nice to be in here. Have you done anything like this before?
No, first podcast, couple of webinars, speaking at a couple of events, but the very first podcast. So
Yeah. So we've done a few before. We're continuing them on, and delighted to have you on from C2, of course. So do you want to talk a bit about your background, I suppose, and your role within C2?
Yeah, sure. So I started in the automation space in 2015 as part of a large consultancy as a management consultant, and it started off very much working around business performance improvement. Lean Six Sigma type roles, looking at traditional process improvement methods. It very quickly then took a turn to how to use technology to improve processes. So I found myself delivering automation projects using a variety of different technologies, RPA, BPM, these types of tools that are very common today. At the time, they were next gen, pioneering technologies. So I spent a lot of time doing that from a technical perspective, delivering as a developer, but also as a project manager, engagement lead, operational support roles as well. So in that space, I'd done quite a lot from a delivery perspective. And then I very soon found myself on the dark side within the sales roles. So I made that move to Automation Anywhere. I was with Automation Anywhere, had an excellent time for about 4 years. And really helping to scale out their European business. And again, came across a lot of challenges along the way, which is, really interesting in terms of what we're going to talk about today. And whilst I was at Automation Anywhere, I started seeing some frustrations across not just Automation Anywhere customers, but across the industry around how automation technologies, let's say specifically RPA, was handled. And that's where I actually came across C2. So I joined C2. I moved over from Automation Anywhere to C2 about just under 3 years ago now. So
very good.
Yeah, it's been a good 3 years here at C2 so far.
Great stuff. I think it's really interesting that you're coming from a delivery background, so you can kind of use all that knowledge, I suppose, when you are in the role that you're in now. Definitely helps, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it helps me understand the thought process, but also the experiences of our customers.
Yeah. Brilliant. So I suppose today we'll kind of dive into, what tools C2 have and the benefits that can provide. Of course, it's really aligning really well in terms of a partnership with Roboyo and being able to, bring our managed services offering to the next level and in a way to be able to, do what we currently do, but then add the tool that C2 have so that we're able to kind of bolster that service offering. So yeah, I suppose we're going really kind of away from the break fix of managed services and kind of the old style to being able to kind of be a bit more proactive when it comes to that and being able to align and be able to feed that back to the stakeholders within a client. Just talk me through kind of what the tool provides and how that's able to benefit the clients.
No, absolutely. I think it will probably help as well if I kind of take you back as to why our founders started C2, because it really answers answers a lot of these questions in reality, because these problems still exist today. So C2 as a concept, or as an organisation, it was essentially rebranded from an organisation last year. So the organisation that I joined 2.5-3 years ago was called RPA Supervisor. And that software organisation was born out of a consultancy that was based in the Nordics. And our founders were very early adopters of new technologies. So the likes of Blue Prism, UiPath, document understanding technologies. And these initial conversations were happening in around 2013, 2014. So very early in the RPA, in RPA terms. And what our founders established was that deploying a process, building a process was one thing, and the expectation was job done, on to the next one. But in reality, what happened was that their highly skilled, highly paid consultants ended up being a victim of their own success. So the more they built, the more time they spent monitoring and babysitting automations, regardless of the technologies. So our founders took that to the leading RPA vendors at the time and said, essentially, here are our findings. What are you going to do about it? And the answer was very little. If you look at the track record of these automation companies over the past, there's been a huge amount of product development in the front end. How to find new processes, how to build more processes. But it's very seldom been around how to help manage and support lots of processes. And that may be down to licensing models, who knows, but the control rooms and the orchestrators of the world have really been quite neglected. So the response from those organisations was to, you build it and we will partner with you. And that's exactly what our founders did. They span up a software organisation separate to the consultancy, and we're completely independent now as well. And they founded a technology called RPA Supervisor that at the time was very focused on RPA, as you can tell by the name. And it was a post-production tool looking to monitor, manage and orchestrate these RPA technologies. So you can have your highly skilled developers, your skilled consultants focusing on adding value rather than babysitting bots or babysitting automated processes.
Exactly, yeah.
And again, that's something that's still very prevalent today. I think the efficiency part is of the people is one part, but it's also the reliability. We started looking at automating the automations for the same reason as why you're automating the business process. So the reason why you automate a business process, I think the reasons are the same then as what they are now, is that it's quicker. It's more reliable, it makes less mistakes, and it could be 24/7 if done correctly. And that's also why we automate the automations, in order to make it more reliable and more trustworthy as a technology category.
I think what's really good about it as well is that it's not just reporting on, okay, you do automations on the automations like you're saying, but it's not just reporting on what's gone broken. It's actually providing that kind of business level SLAs as well, where it's saying, look, this is all the automations that have happened. These are the ones that have gone successfully. These are the ones that have gone successfully within the SLA. These ones have gone successfully with human intervention, without human intervention, rather than just saying these are the ones that are broken, because that provides zero context for the business. And at the end of the day, they want to know how successful their automations are, rather than just knowing, oh, this one broke, and not having anything around it. So I think it's great that technology provides that input and kind of easy to explain to a business user within a company.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's fundamental not just to report on what's happening, but what we try to do, we're fundamentally changing what is happening, changing how you receive the work, and then changing how we prioritise the work. And like I said, initially that was just RPA, but how can we also receive work from different systems and distribute work to different systems, whether that's different RPA tools, Microsoft Power Automate, or any other component of the Power Platform, for example.
Exactly, yeah.
But how can we fundamentally change the way that these technologies, or these automation initiatives, let's call them as a concept, are receiving work, then how we're distributing that work? I think that's a fundamental difference, because then we are reporting on it, rather than just reporting on how it's happening today.
Yeah, and it's actually having that proactive step and going back to the business and saying, look, we've identified these areas. That's not it, though. We can actually implement a way of changing it as well. So it's really nice, I suppose, and it kind of goes back to why the partnership aligns so well, is because from a Roboyo standpoint in the managed services offerings, we can provide that, but with the tool of C2, adding that in and adding that kind of proactivity as well and bolstering that offering, it's just perfect for reaching out to current clients and also new clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the messaging with Roboyo is really great. I think Roboyo as a tech-agnostic consultancy, that's now also got a tech-agnostic tech platform underpinning the managed services. I think that really allows you to excel. I think there's, it's almost a double-edged sword in this regards. Your guys in managed services as well don't like sitting there monitoring, managing.
Yeah.
They should be there focused on continuous improvement, adding value, or even moving to process development, for example. So there's a huge benefit to Roboyo, but critically, there's a huge benefit to your customers that you're able to provide a managed service that adheres to higher service levels than what you could do with a human-led approach. And this is just another way, I suppose, at showing that things are changing constantly. And Roboyo again is innovating to take managed services to that next level, 2.0, so to say.
Exactly. And speaking to Joe over the last couple of weeks, who kind of heads up that from a Roboyo perspective, he's extremely excited about the partnership, but has also seen the benefits of it and it actually coming to fruition with a few clients over the last while. So really looking forward to seeing how that kind of progresses as well. Is there anything in particular that kind of stands out to you from a client example, for instance, of how you're able to kind of provide that benefit?
Yeah, it's interesting because our customers in general come to us with a variety of different challenges, and some challenges, it may. I always try and articulate this on a spectrum. So maybe at one end you've got efficiency, maybe you've got a technology stack, you've got infrastructure, and you've got people that you're simply not utilising in the correct manner. So they're looking for savings. And in many cases, as the automation estates grow, there's pressure on the types of processes that you automate. So at first, you may automate the low-hanging fruit, classic term, which are big chunky processes, high FTE savings, all the ones that deliver you the best savings, whatever your KPIs are.
Yeah.
But as you automate more, generally your business case will probably become smaller and smaller. Yet the total cost of ownership of automation generally remains the same.
Yeah.
So you end up with that kind of getting to a tipping point in which actually the business cases have become so small. Is it feasible to continue automating?
Yeah.
So I think this is another kind of cliche statement, is that access to the tail end of automation. Access to a huge amount of business cases that are technically feasible to automate, but previously were not possible because of the business case. So if we can help separate that line of, let's say, more processes equals more licenses, more virtual machines, more people supporting, then we can access that tail end of automation. And I see this at the kind of the far left of our spectrum of benefits. And then as we start kind of flowing through, we've got things like, automating your support to free up people to ensure that your team remains with you for longer, keep them happier, stop them from moving on to pastures new. Automated SLA adherence. Are you automating regulatory processes? So if you are automating regulatory processes, the majority of the automation platforms today cannot tell you whether you're hitting your SLAs. And if they can tell you, they certainly can't drive execution towards hitting it.
Exactly.
So, and then on the far end, we've got reliability, recoverability. What happens when you've got an automation initiative? Whether you're automating 20 FTEs of work, we've got customers who automate over 1,000 FTEs of work.
Right.
And if those robots go down, what's the impact to the business? So we've had situations where traditional automation technologies have gone down and it can take 24 hours, say, to get back to BAU. That's potentially 1,000 FTEs not turning up to work on a given day. And even if it's 20, depending on the size of the organisation, regardless, that's going to be an impact on someone's team in someone's organisation. So it's really that belt and braces, almost like an insurance policy for automation, but also it's your kind of your automated business continuity.
Yeah. No, great points there. And I suppose it shows that, the point you were making earlier about all the effort went into finding the use cases and automating things and then onto the next one rather than kind of managing and looking after whatever you have. It kind of plays to the importance of having that there, like you said, the belts and braces to make sure that, everything isn't falling down around you. And if it does happen, that there's a way of actually getting it back on track again.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's huge. You spoke about kind of your experience with the clients. Do you see, and I suppose we were saying about RPA and Power Automate and how that's kind of where it was rooted. Do you see how the transition and the emergence of new technologies and how C2 and that partnership in general can kind of adapt towards that?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because when you look at all the big tech platforms, they're trying to create, trying to have everything within one platform.
Exactly, yeah.
And kind of be a jack of all trades. Whereas we really see the future going that organisations want to choose best of breed. But there's a couple of reasons why they don't. And one of them is the burden of managing them. So if you've got, multiple different technologies, all with different user interfaces, in many cases, people just try and use the tool that they've already got.
Yeah. Which makes sense from a client's perspective.
A square peg in a round hole, or vice versa.
Yeah.
So we'd really like to kind of help our customers choose the best technology for the job. And in many cases, even when they do that, they choose the best technology for a process. So the most common situation that we see at the moment is that you've got let's say a RPA Centre of Excellence. Let's say they focus on UiPath. You've then got a Microsoft Power Platform Centre of Excellence somewhere far, far away in the organisation. The first thing we see is that if they do even talk to each other, in many cases they don't, and they're completely separate. But if they are lucky enough to talk to each other, sometimes they'll say, well, this process is for Microsoft. This process is for UiPath. And when you start looking at processes, you've got processes that touch maybe 5, 10, 15 different applications, all with an end-to-end process. So it's very difficult to have that rigid approach of saying this one's X, this one's Y. So we're seeing a lot of cases now in these two technologies, let's say, or RPA and Power Platform, or Power Automate, which is becoming really quite popular, or at least at the front of everyone's mind, that these centre of excellences are starting to gravitate towards each other. And in many cases, they've actually joined. And we're helping customers now not to say, this one's UiPath, this one's Power Automate. We're saying, this part of the process is UiPath. This part is a Cloudflow. This part is UiPath. This part may be a Power App, for example. So we're able to combine multiple technologies within the same workflow and decrease the burden of managing two technologies, but also critically allowing multiple technologies to work seamlessly together without this kind of sticky plaster approach between them.
Or even avoiding it.
Exactly, yeah. Which is probably the most common. I think the most common case is avoid integrating them, separate processes.
Definitely, yeah. And in terms of C2 and the tool itself, how does that actually work in terms of being able to integrate all those different technologies and the different vendors?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways in that we do it. So if I kind of give a bit of a background as to how we connect to these technologies, and I could talk to you about how we integrate them. So, and bearing in mind, I'm not again,
of course,
used to be a little bit more technical than I am today. So when we work with traditional RPA vendors, we generally connect to the control rooms and the orchestrators. We have an API first policy. And of course, if the available APIs are there, then of course that's our go-to approach, but we can also connect via database connections and so on as well. We're able to start commanding and controlling, and that's what C2 stands for. So C2, well, command and control is a military terminology. Probably should have mentioned this at the very beginning.
I think we love those types of terminology in this space, though. It's very mission critical.
Exactly, yeah. And it's really interesting. And it kind of the move from RPA supervisors to C2 is partly, command and control are really the functions that we do, but also critically, it's we're not just RPA anymore. So we're looking at combining these technologies. But when we do connect to RPA, we simply, like I said, establish a connection between ourselves and the orchestrators and the control rooms of the world, and then we start taking control of these processes. So instead of scheduling a process, we turn those schedules off in the control rooms and the orchestrators. For us, the word schedule is a little bit dirty because a schedule is rigid, a schedule is static, and a schedule cannot react to your changing business needs every second. And if it does change, it requires a person to change it. So if more workload comes in than expected or less than expected, virtual machines become available or virtual machines go down.
You're not actually helping the issue.
It's a human action that needs taking place. And that human action is technically a very bad game of Tetris. Trying to squeeze processes in the right place, and you don't have much time to think about it, because work's continually coming at you.
Of course, yeah.
So it's like the block's coming down and you're trying to figure out where to fit, and you end up with a very bad game with lots of gaps. Lots of gaps with missed deadlines, where actually you look back retrospectively, you see the gaps, and you think, I could have hit my deadline and my processes run in these moments, for example. So we changed the way that processes are executed by schedules. We moved them to dynamic SLA based. We've spoken about SLAs. When we talk about SLAs, we're talking about process SLAs. This process has to be executed within 5 minutes. Maybe it's a customer facing process. Maybe it's immediate. Or maybe it's a payroll process by 5 p.m. of the last working day of the month, whatever it may be. So it's the opposite to a schedule. And then we start saying, when can these processes work? The most common situation, or the most common example, may be application availability or regulatory requirement. So this has to run between 9 and 5. So once we start doing that, C2 starts dictating when processes can and can't run, and automatically prioritizing with a machine learning algorithm every 15 seconds. So that's how we work with general processes. We then start understanding, what does bad look like? So if this process runs for longer than expected, if we breach the SLA, what should we do? All of these types of things. So we have a concept called underperformance profiles. So this will allow you to say, if your processes or if your virtual machines are behaving badly, what should we do? And that may be retrying the process. It may be, if it looks like we're going to miss the SLA, let's notify you as soon as possible so you can start planning in order to hit it. It may be restarting the virtual machine. It may be banning processes or banning virtual machines because they're serial offenders, continually causing problems. So we can auto recover these processes when they fail. Critically, we can't auto heal. You can't rewrite the code if your change management or your change management process isn't up to scratch. Well, that needs solving.
You can highlight it, but
we can say, this process hasn't run. It hasn't run on this machine 5 times, and nor has any other process that touches the same application. We'll raise a support ticket for you. So it allows you to change from that eyes on glass detection or support model to this proactive management by exception. We'll call you when we need you type. So that's kind of traditional RPA, and that's how we change the way things are done. We then report on it, provide great dashboards for all different types of stakeholders to access, which sounds really simple, but it's so powerful.
Very effective.
Providing the right data at the right time to the right people. And it's always got to me in terms of the RPA vendors especially have had all of this information at their fingertips for so long, yet very little has been done about it, even in individual technologies. But then when you start looking at across multiple technologies, we can amalgamate it all in one place. So now going on to your original question, and how do we connect multiple? So we can connect to multiple different RPA platforms, as I've mentioned, under one place. So that's one element. So you may have multiple orchestrators, multiple control rooms, or you may have a Blue Prism instance, a UiPath instance, and an Automation Anywhere instance. Again, we can provide the same user interface and onboard processes together across these technologies. When it comes to technologies that we haven't built this kind of specific adapter for these kind of the core RPA platforms, because RPA is a different beast in its own. The support requirements for RPA outweigh any of the other automation technologies because it's dependent upon underlying infrastructure, applications, and so on. And it's not necessarily that the RPA vendors are at fault. It's really just because it is fragile because of the nature of what RPA does, user interface automations. So now we've got this concept of what we call universal queuing, which is really, really interesting for for those technologies that don't have excellent queuing mechanisms. And I won't name, there's a couple of automation vendors who aren't great at it. There's some who are very good at it. But it's also really interesting for those who have multiple technologies and you want one way of working, one audit trail for all of your technologies. And this is when it starts becoming really powerful, connecting different technologies to it. So again, API first, we're looking at any technology that can consume our API to be able to load items onto a queue. We can then work with the queuing mechanism and distribute work to any technology, again, that has access or that can consume the API. So that may be one of the kind of the arms and the legs of the adapters that we're already working with, the Blue Prisms, UiPaths, Automation Anywheres of the world, the Microsofts. But it may be a technology outside of that. You may want to use SAP in-house, inbuilt automation or Salesforce automation. All of these apps have them now as well. Or it may be a completely different technology like a BPM tool or whatever it may be. So as long as it can access through the API, we can now start tracking work across all of these different systems. So the integration is different between a core RPA vendor versus outside of that, but it's our universal queuing mechanism that allows us to do so.
Brilliant, yeah. I think, obviously, you covered a lot there. I think it's really good to kind of get a holistic view of how that works. And I think just one of the key things that you mentioned was on the proactivity side of things. It's like, yes, we can provide the dashboards, but it's the and the fixes, of course, but it's the the restarting of the VMs, without even like the client even knowing, because you're just picking up on all these little things rather than keeping it alive, I suppose, rather than saying, oh, there's a problem, like, should we do it or not? So you don't even need that kind of I suppose guidance from the client. You're doing it proactively and you're really showing that we're keeping everything together here. And I think the point around the integration between the technologies is huge, because we're seeing that more and more within clients, that they have a little bit of this technology or have a little bit of low code and they have RPA integrated with it, and to have a platform like yourselves that can kind of sit across all of that and orchestrate it, like you're saying, is huge. In terms of the trends that you see moving forward from kind of where you started to where you are now, what do you kind of see what the clients are adapting to more, or how do you feel that C2 are adapting to be able to keep up with the needs of the client?
Yeah, no, it's I think Microsoft is the biggest thing that we're seeing at the moment, is that if our customers or prospects aren't already using it, they're trying to. Okay. They're looking at it, they're talking about it. However, there's a lot of fear amongst them as well, kind of it spreading like wildfire, it being ungovernable and all these things, similar to like Excels, for example, macros. Yeah. So that's a big topic that we're coming across. Like, how can we help govern almost the ungovernable, so to say. But how can we put that wrapper around the Power Platform, whether it's Power Automate Desktop or let's say Cloud Flows, whatever it may be. That's something that I'm seeing a lot. What I was seeing, and I think one of the challenges that kind of popped up in a trend, was the reluctance to use, let's say, RPA for mission critical regulatory
there we go. Mission critical
and customer facing processes.
Yeah.
And that was a trend, negative. I wouldn't say it's a progressive trend, but because of the fragility of, or the perceived fragility and brittleness of RPA.
And why do you think that is? Like, is that from war stories from other people, like word of mouth of what they've heard, or from your experience in speaking to clients, what do they say is the reason for not being able to, or not wanting to use RPA for those processes?
Yeah, I think it probably goes back a little bit onto the managed service topic. I think getting that support model right is very hard internally. Getting the right people in place is difficult as well. Many organisations don't have their centre of excellences running 24/7.
Yeah,
and lots of them are 24/7 businesses. So there's sometimes a reluctance to submit those, or to get your internal customers to give you those processes, to trust you, to automate them.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important for things like, like this managed service we've been talking about, with or without C2 in general, having a good support model in place that can react quick enough so you can minimize business disruption when problems do occur. And problems, when I say do, kind of in capital and bold, they will occur.
Yeah.
These problems will occur. And even with C2, they still occur. But what we need to do is minimize the impact from the business, mask those problems, and I'm going to use the term automated business continuity. We're here for the same reason as, in many cases, why you guys stood up your managed service offering many years ago. It's the same concept, is that you want to, one, allow people to free up their time, so you focus on the monitoring, management and support and allow them to scale. But two, they will hold you to account for the service levels, which is quite normal in a managed service contract. So, I think that's really it. Do they trust the technology enough or the initiative enough? Because it's not the technology, it's the initiative and the success of the initiative internally within their organisation. Do they trust it enough to give it core business processes? And I see with C2, our customers always automate more of those processes than before they had C2. Okay. And I think this is a really big statement from what we do.
Absolutely. And I suppose it's not the technology that they're unsure about. It's, like you said, the infrastructure around it, and knowing that they have a strong managed services offering or kind of support there, that they can just go for it and kind of deploy these things within production if they're confident that they have something to kind of back it up, which is great. In terms of that Microsoft point that you were speaking about, we're seeing that as well, where it's not a bad horse to back in terms of Microsoft and kind of all the different offerings that they have. And I suppose when it comes to Power Automate and Power Platform, is that something that you would have the most experience in from your client base, or is that just something that you're kind of noticing in terms of trends?
Definitely a trend. Everyone's talking about it. Not as many are doing it, but we do have customers doing it, certainly. We've got customers working with their core RPA vendors and integrating with, I think at this moment in time, most traditionally it's Cloudflows is the most, if we're looking at Power Automate technologies.
Yeah.
What we've found is that a lot of organizations have been looking at some very good marketing from Microsoft around license models and so on. That gets a lot of customers very excited around potentially moving all of their robots, automated processes, bots, whatever you call them, to Microsoft. And we've helped a number of customers, run these types of reviews as to, can you move from one to another without degrading the quality of your service? And in many cases, the answers come back as no, you can't at the moment. And, the Power Platform in general is progressing at lightning speed. But, you forget companies like Blue Prism have been around for 20 years, actually. And UiPath, very long as well. Same with Automation Anywhere. So no matter how fast they adapt, and they've got some, and again, very good comparison to what we mentioned around the core RPA vendors when RPA Supervisor and C2 started. They've got in Power Platform the automatic creation of processes, yet they barely have a control room. So that analogy of investing in the front end of how to find more, how to build more, versus how to manage more.
Exactly.
It's happening again. It's exactly the same as it was 10 years ago.
Okay.
But I think in general, when they look to replace, we help them come to a realization very quickly that it isn't about replacing the technology. UiPath is great at what it does. Automation Anywhere and Blue Prism are great at what they do. But so is Power Platform, Power Automate. And these technologies can work wonderfully side by side together. But you need something that allows them to connect to each other seamlessly.
Exactly.
And again, that's the space that we're looking to play as well.
Yeah, no, I just think it's interesting because that conversation, because you kind of have everything under the kind of Power Platform, it's easy for the client just to say, well, we have Excel set up, we have maybe Power Automate, let's just do Power Platform rather than an app.
And we've already got Microsoft and it's already in our license agreement.
Exactly, and you go to your IT department and they're like, well, have you tried Microsoft first before we introduce another one? So it's just interesting, I suppose, to be able to, and from a Roboyo and C2 point of view, it's tech agnostic, which is fine. So we're kind of going to adapt to that. But it's just interesting from a client perspective, and it makes sense from a client perspective as well that it does take the fear out of it or the unknown in a way, just to kind of move into those different areas and things that they provide. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And I think there's another element to this as well, kind of dual vendor strategies. I think you speak to a lot of customers today of, UiPath, AA, Blue Prism. License prices are increasing quite dramatically. And a lot of customers feel quite disgruntled about this. Yet they've got one technology in their toolbox. So I think as a customer, it's really important to have different vendors, not just for the sake of it. I think there's always a technical rationale behind it too. But it also promotes that little bit more of, I suppose, ensuring people behave themselves. Because I've seen in accounts where let's say Microsoft are there and let's say Blue Prism are there too. Everyone plays nicely, and it's no one's looking at vendors being particularly aggressive with pricing, whatever it may be. So there's different benefits. Not only having the best tool for the job, but it also allows you to manage your let's say your ecosystem of technology partners more effectively as well. Yeah,
it's an interesting point. That I suppose on going back to bolstering the managed services offering, it's kind of at a stage now with, I suppose, from a Roboyo standpoint of having this managed services 2.0 along with C2, where you can actively go out to clients, and either existing clients that have large portfolios that we're all aware of, or new clients or new logos where you're saying, look, we know that there's tech debt issues there. We know that there's kind of issues in terms of managing the support model, like you were saying. That feels like something new rather than, doing the automation and then having managed services as well. Do you find that as well now that with the partnership that this is kind of like a much stronger offering, that you can go directly to a client and say, look, we know that there's issues going on here. This is what we can do to help.
Yeah, and I also think having it, C2 takes it so far from a technology perspective. Like you said, there's many things that we cannot do that humans have to do. So we're not claiming to auto heal and whatever else. So for me, I think it's really important that working with the likes of with Roboyo to be able to say, here's a fully kind of end-to-end service with technology led, backed up by expert people. And I think that makes it really easy now to go and kind of tick the box for many customers who are actually experiencing very similar challenges around the more you build, the more you monitor. And that's a really simplified view of putting it. The more, just imagine that, the more you build, the more you actually spend less time building.
Yeah.
So you've got incredibly skilled people, and we can solve those challenges and the knock-on effect of that as well. So for me, I think really important we have an end-to-end solution, not just, again, causing a problem by chucking in another technology. It's an end-to-end solution with end-to-end coverage.
Exactly, and just kind of, I suppose, speaking with people internally within Roboyo, they're really excited to have this as well, because the benefits of the time that they would have spent trying to kind of bring this knowledge to the client is done directly through the technology as well. So from their perspective as well, it's the exact same, where it's feeling a lot more confident going into the client and saying, like, look, we have all this information to back up what we're actually saying, and we're getting it done at super efficient rates as well, which is of course something that you want to kind of bring forward to your clients.
I think that's I think I mentioned earlier around just providing information at the right time to the right people. How undervalued that it sounds so simple, doesn't it? But it's it really allows many other benefits. One, you guys are saving a lot of time not having to scrape that together. And two, you're saving a lot of time by not having ad hoc requests for the business. This is the same for even an internal COE with an internal support model. So we're saying they're being the majority of the time you're being inundated with requests for very simple information.
Of course,
in many cases, it's quite difficult to provide. So let's be proactive with what we give and distribute. So the kind of the licensing model around C2 when it comes to dashboards, users, all of this, well, first of all, dashboards are automatically available through what we call widgets, and you can build them yourself. Of course, everything's locked down through role-based access controls. But then you couple this with unlimited access and unlimited dashboards. In theory, it means, and what our customers do, is every single process owner that you automate a business for has a real-time dashboard around the information that you want them to see. But in a similar way with the control room, when there's a dashboard, there's an innate will to stare at it. Same with the control room. So we want to move away from this, like I said, eyes on glass to management by exception. So yes, we'll give you a real-time dashboard, or we can distribute it on a an hourly, weekly, monthly, daily basis, whatever you like. But we should tell you about something when it's important. So proactive notifications that give visibility when they need visibility.
Exactly,
And this is another kind of, I suppose, moving from a traditional way of orchestrating or schedules to dynamic, there's a big kind of mindset change that needs to take place. So customers say, my process runs at 9. But why does it run at 9? People normally drop the folder in at 8:30, and it's always there by 9. I said, well, maybe we should just run this process when the folder gets dropped, and we should use a file or a folder trigger or an email trigger.
Yeah.
And we can move to this more kind of event-driven orchestration initiative. This is kind of when I was talking about how we dictate how we receive the work, not just prioritize it.
Exactly, yeah.
So when you're moving to this dynamic nature at the very beginning, people are used to what automation's been doing for the last 5 years or 10 years, which is my process runs at 9 every Monday. And if it's not there by 9:30, there's a problem and I'm going to email someone.
Yeah.
Whereas, so you have to
Which is the
educate
break
the
fix.
business.
Like, exactly.
Exactly. So we have to educate them, give them a chance as well to understand this new model, dynamic, event-driven orchestration, essentially. So we really want to move customers to this, out of this mindset. Some people say, I have to have a schedule. You've got 50 processes, but this one has to be a schedule. We will say, why? Why does it need a schedule? The answer is normally it's always had a schedule.
Yeah.
But it's not really
it's
the right
been.
answer.
Yeah.
But there's a trigger somewhere up the chain, whether it's a system, a case in a system, an email, a file, a folder. And this is where, again, the connection with Microsoft really, really helps. Not just to execute the work, like you would assume, Power Automate competing with say, UiPath, but actually to feed the work. Within the Power Platform, there's thousands of triggers that you can connect to thousands of different applications. And if you can move the way you intake work, your triggers, to this event-driven orchestration piece, it allows you to be really efficient. Because what you need to understand as well is, when you're looking at licenses for different RPA vendors, you're always capped at the level that you purchase, and that may be concurrent runtime sessions. We get this question from customers all the time, like, how do you guarantee you're going to hit the SLA because you don't know the workload?
Exactly, yeah.
And of course, we can look at historical workload, but still, it doesn't stop from that doesn't really help when crazy events take place, whether it's more or less in terms of transaction volumes. So what we need to ensure, and our platform does, is that let's receive the work as soon as possible. And then let's execute it as soon as possible. So if you've got a 5-hour SLA and we can hit it in 1, we will hit it in 1.
Yeah.
1, because we think that's good in terms of let's over-deliver on the SLA. But 2, it allows us to have more capacity later on when other work may or may not come in. And that's really, really important, I think. Executing work as soon as possible. And this is where some of our dashboards really come into play as well. We see, it's really funny actually, when we give dashboards to customers to kind of increase this visibility. And at first, I think there's 200, 300 different widgets that we have that we can report on. They want everything. Incidents, resource incidents, workflows, tasks.
Is this at the start though?
At the start,
then,
they want everything. And then at the end, 6 months later, 12 months later, they have one widget.
Exactly, yeah.
SLA adherence. Yeah. Did we hit the deadline or did we not?
Yeah.
And then when we start looking at deadlines, we start saying, well, actually, if C2 is delivering a 2-hour SLA in 1 hour or a 10-hour SLA in 5 hours, what benefit is there to the organization? So this is where we start really challenging our customers to say, really interesting actually, I mentioned this is the first podcast I did, but recently I did a webinar with one of our large insurance customers. And we're looking at core insurance processes.
Okay.
New quotes, for example, and first notification of loss, I think one of them was as well. And when you're looking at new business quotes, for example, so someone coming in and putting in a request for an insurance policy, there's generally an unwritten rule that if you and for them it's not hard and fast SLA. So caveat this, because it's on the webinar, that making sure that they're not committing to their customers to hit it.
We'll put a link in the webinar afterwards.
But for this particular customer, it's an unwritten rule in the insurance industry that if you respond to the quote within 15 minutes, you generally win the customer.
Right, okay.
And it's very difficult to do that because it's completely unpredictable in terms of volumes. And if you do want to hit the SLAs, you then have to reserve resources, digital workers or licenses in order to. So our customers end up in this predicament of wanting to be either efficient or responsive. And it's an or.
Yeah.
It's not both. You cannot be both.
Yeah.
And the more efficient you are, the more risk you incur for missing deadlines and not being responsive. And the more responsive you are, the less efficient you are. So this is the challenge. So the intention wasn't even to actually, achieve the SLA in 15 minutes. The real intention was around removing support personnel from the team. So they wanted to reposition people who are monitoring, managing robots into continuous improvement roles, as it was always intended to be.
Yeah.
But what they found is that CT is just doing the work quickly. Resources are available. So instead of them being idle, sat over there, and a human having to move them, digital work, and say, right, you now work on this queue, CT would say, you're idle, we have volume, come over here and help out. And it's a core insurance process that allows you to shift the main benefits of automation away from FTE savings, hours saved, to top line growth. How many more customers have we won? Yeah. So we're always looking for those gems of processes and challenging them and say, your SLA is 2 hours, why is it 2? What happens if it's 1? And we've done the same with a mortgage provider in the US on mortgage applications.
Brilliant,
increasing win rates essentially.
Yeah, no, that's a brilliant example. It's amazing listening to it really, because it is such a mindset shift, like you were saying, away from the processes here, just mind it and tell us if anything's going wrong, to it being extremely, and I know we've used it so much in the episode about being proactive, but it really is, because you're challenging the customer where that wouldn't have really happened before in terms of kind of traditional support models. So it's really good to hear that. I think one of the points as well that you raised about the dashboards and all the different widgets that the customer or some of the product or the process owners wanted to see. It's about getting their buy-in as well when it comes to this, because a lot of times when they're raising issues or they're consulted about, we want to look at this process that you have here that maybe we could have some technology in. Once they kind of provide their input, it kind of just gets lost and they don't really have any idea of what's going on or how it's actually performing. They only know of that it broke a couple of times because someone 3 levels above kind of trickled down and I found out. While you're providing this information to them live, they can check up on something that they were involved in. And then this creates a great kind of atmosphere around the company as well, where that can spread. We're saying, that actually worked really well, and maybe we should look at this process. And this process, you're creating a kind of a culture of automation there as well. And if it's successful, then it'll only grow, and more opportunities will come from it. So it is a mindset shift, and it's also kind of bringing people along on a journey as well in terms of that.
And I think in the question you asked earlier around critical processes and why organisations may not automate them, and I probably every new customer call that I have, I use this term of when a process owner gives a process to be automated, they never have the visibility again that they once had.
That's it.
Fair enough, they did it manually, but they don't have that visibility anymore, and automation's often a bit of a black hole.
That's it.
And that's also one of the reasons why critical processes don't get automated. That we find is that, well, one, there's no trust, there's no visibility, therefore there's no trust, and also it's like us and them scenario. Whereas exactly this is and I get told off sometimes internally and say we're a post-production tool type element, and of course now we're working very much on how we feed the work as well. So if you feed the work with regards to triggers, you can start affecting development standards, for example, across multiple different technologies. But also it's a business engagement tool.
Yeah.
How can we ensure that we give the visibility to the right people at the right time, but critically give them control as well? Things like human in the loop and assisted automation. How can we ensure that they, a big thing of what we do is triggers. A human can be a trigger. Yeah. So we need to provide that element for them to communicate, interact, or trigger processes both ways. Robots asking humans for help, humans asking robots for help. And again, it's a great way of increasing kind of, not many use it so much now, but kind of straight through processing rates. When you get your exceptions, in many cases it becomes, I've encountered a problem, therefore it's now a manual process. whether that's 20% of the way through the process or 80%. So what we want to be able to do is, again, similar to our dashboards, unlimited access for anyone in the organisation. Don't be scared, it's role-based access, controlled, so you can lock it down. But whenever a robot encounters a problem and would normally throw an exception, can we pass it to a human and pass it back to the robot? So it doesn't just spit it out and become a manual process, so you can keep your STP or your straight-through processing rates nice and high.
Yeah, no, I think it's like we touched on, it's about getting the buy-in, because sometimes there is a bit of hesitancy around that. Being able to provide that and being able to give them the confidence to kind of look and maybe look for something else to automate within processes in the company is massive. When you're looking now towards, I suppose we're coming a bit to the end now, if you're looking in the future of how you see, I suppose, the partnership with Roboyo and C2 going in the future, how do you kind of see that working over the next while, where you're going into new clients or you're going in within existing clients that have kind of portfolios that need to be tackled?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think the partnership can go in many ways. I think we're already exploring outside of managed services as well. So in terms of consulting and implementation approaches, many customers decide to, for example, have their support model in-house. So how can we help with Roboyo's guidance of getting C2 in there to be that kind of L1, L2 type support mechanism as well? So I think certainly expanding it across all kind of go-to-markets, let's say, consulting, implementation and managed services. But I think Roboyo's reach is huge globally, isn't it? I think I saw something recently that the world's largest pure play automation consultancy, and again, really important that it's tech agnostic. So I'm sure, as we are, but you are as well, continually evaluating the market. Hence how we found each other as well, for new technologies that can innovate in this space. Whether it's helping to monitor, manage, and orchestrate technologies, or is it one of the technologies that need monitoring, managing, or orchestrating? So you have, far-reaching partnerships, likes of in a different space, maybe Appian as well, the BPM type space, but of course the core RPA vendors and Microsoft. So I think it's a great space to be in, and a great opportunity for us to learn for you as well, because the wider view we get of the market, and I think we're both very privileged because we see all of the customers with different technologies. Whereas when I worked for Automation Anywhere, you've got these blinkers on. RPA, everyone acts, you believe everyone behaves in this particular way. And then you step out of that zone for a moment and you're thinking, there's a whole new world out here. So I think we're both in very privileged positions to say, actually, the possibilities are almost endless. And we really do, I think both of us align, both our organisations align really well of, it's best of breed. We're agnostic. We have no preference in terms of what technologies you use. And I'm sure you choose the right technologies for the right reasons, Mr. Customer. Let's help you manage them. And let's help you connect them together.
Brilliant. No, I think that was great. Really enjoyed that, Ollie. Also, we had the All Eyes on Automation event in the US a couple of months ago. I think a couple of your colleagues were at it, but you'll have to come to the one now in Berlin. There's
absolutely. I didn't make the cut for the one in Miami. I would have loved to.
That's right. I think there was quite a few C2 people now that wanted to go to the one in Miami, which makes sense. But really enjoyed that. That was great, and looking forward to seeing you over in Berlin.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.